I still remember the chipped formica on that library table, a perfect pale circle worn right through the orange laminate. It was the autumn of my second year, and I spent nearly every evening there trying to get ahead on readings for my history courses. A fellow student began using the table too, always the seat closest to me, which was odd considering how many empty ones there were. We were both archaeology majors but hadn't spoken more than a handful of times in class. The chipped formica was the first thing I really noticed. I guess, not right away. I'd been working on the Anglo-Saxon charters, mostly trying to decipher some of the scribal abbreviations. It was a Tuesday, I think. Tuesdays were good for that table. It was the quietest night. I'd gotten into a rhythm, coffee, primary source, translation, repeat. Then I shifted my bag, and the leg of my chair caught on something. A little snag. I looked down, and that's when I saw it. The circular wear pattern looked like someone had been rotating something. Constantly. It wasn't just wear, it was a distinct groove, centered about 6 inches from the edge of the table, and it didn't make any sense. People don't rotate things on library tables. You put a book down, you write, you type, you don't spin something. I tried to picture it. Maybe someone had a fidget toy? One of those little wooden things, but it seemed older than that, deeper. I glanced over at Abel. He was sketching in a notebook, same as always. He hadn't even looked up. He didn't seem like the fidget toy type anyway. More methodical. I remember thinking it must have been before my time. Someone who used to study here years ago, maybe an architecture student doing drafting. It explained the precision, the constant circular motion. It just didn't explain why it was so fresh. The chip in the formica itself looked new, like it hadn't been there last semester. Then I remembered Dora mentioning the library had gotten some renovations done over the summer. New lighting, some furniture replacements. Maybe they'd just refinished the tables and someone had immediately started wearing a patch into it. That had to be it. Still, it bothered me. It felt purposeful. I started taking a different route to the library. It wasn't a huge detour, just cutting through the botany building instead of along the quad. It felt exposed out there, like being on a stage, and it was stupid. I know, it's a university campus, people walk around, but I kept picturing someone just watching. It wasn't just the table anymore. I'd started noticing things, small things. My usual spot in the stacks, the one with the slightly torn upholstery on the chair, always had a book left on it when I got there. Not my books, old journals, mostly archaeology stuff, but not things I'd ever requested. Dora said maybe someone was just being considerate, holding the spot, but they always appeared after I'd left for the day. Then yesterday, I found a small, smooth stone on my desk, just sitting there amongst my notes. It was gray, almost slate-like, and perfectly round. I didn't recognize it. It wasn't from around here. I was pretty sure. I asked Kenji if he'd seen it. He just shrugged. He thought it was a worry stone. Someone probably just dropped it. But the stone, it reminded me of the beach. Not any beach I'd been to recently, though. More Birchwood. That awful summer. I hadn't thought about Birchwood in years. It was just a stupid little coastal town. A family vacation gone wrong. I went back to the library today and checked the table again. The groove was deeper, definitely deeper. And there was something else. A faint scratch, almost invisible, running alongside it. It looked like a letter. Almost like a B. I'm probably just seeing things. It's the stress of the semester, but I definitely didn't see that before. Someone is messing with me. I didn't go back to the library yesterday. I couldn't. I kept picturing that B getting bigger and bolder in my head. It felt personal. Stupid, I know. A scratch on a table. But it was the way it felt, like it was waiting for me to notice. Today, though, I needed the journals. Finals are approaching. The table was different. The groove was practically a channel now, and the B was unmistakable. But it wasn't just that. The air felt colder near the table somehow, and there was a smell. Not unpleasant, exactly. Like damp earth and pine. Birchwood. That smell hit me so hard I almost stumbled. I was reaching for my bag when I heard it. A scraping sound from inside the table. Like something was moving within the wood itself. I froze. It wasn't loud, just a soft rhythmic scrape, scrape, scrape. I told myself it was the building settling, old wood groaning, but the sound was too deliberate, too contained. Then the lights flickered. Just once. And the scraping stopped. I was reaching for my phone, heart hammering, when a book fell, not onto the table, but from beneath it. It slid out, landing open. It was one of my journals, the one I'd been working on all week, the one with the notes on the coastal erosion patterns, except it wasn't just open. Pages were torn out, ripped clean, and on the exposed spine, carved into the cardboard, was another bee, smaller, neater than the one on the table. Someone had been under there. I didn't think. I just ran. I didn't even grab my bag. I just bolted out of the library, practically colliding with Dora on the way. She asked if I was okay, but I couldn't answer. I just kept walking, faster and faster, until I was completely out of breath. It must be some kind of elaborate prank. A really messed up, targeted prank. Rand and his friends, maybe. They always were competitive about research grants, but why Birchwood? Why the bee? I went to campus security, of course. After everything with the table and the journal, I felt ridiculous even walking in there trying to explain it. A carved letter? Scratches? A smell? It sounded insane. I ended up just focusing on the vandalism, the damage to library property. I showed them the photos I'd taken of the table and the bee in my journal. The officer, a woman named Agnes, listened patiently, but I could see her filing it away under stressed student. She took a report, gave me a case number, and said they'd increase patrols in the library. She asked if I suspected anyone, and I mentioned Rand, how competitive he'd been about the grant. She nodded and made a note. It felt anticlimactic. They actually did something with the table. They had a facilities guy come and look at it. He spent 10 minutes running his hands over the wood, then shrugged and said it was just old damage, wear and tear. He mentioned the library was built on an old orchard, something about the wood settling over time. He said the scent I noticed was probably just the aging wood and the cleaning products they used. But he did call in someone else, an archivist named Kenji, who actually knew something about the building's history. Kenji was the one who said the library wasn't the first thing on that land. Apparently, there was a small farmhouse there back in the 1900s, a Birch family, he thought. He showed me old photos, grainy black and whites of a weathered farmhouse where the library now stood. I fixated on the name Birch. It had to be a coincidence, right? Some kind of twisted joke playing on the wood type. But the smell and the bee felt too deliberate. Rand wouldn't have known about a Birch family. He wouldn't have. I started thinking maybe it wasn't about the grant at all. Maybe someone was messing with me, specifically. Someone who knew things about my past. It was unsettling. I felt like I was missing something important, something just out of reach. The police didn't find anything, of course. No forced entry, no evidence of anyone being in the library, just the carved bee and my messed up journal. Agnes was almost smug about it. She said I was probably just stressed, working too hard. Dora tried to be supportive and kept offering to cover some of my shifts, but I felt like a fool. I felt like I'd imagined the whole thing. Still, I started double-checking everything. Doors locked, windows secured. It felt ridiculous, because who would even bother? But the feeling wouldn't shake. I even started sleeping at Dora's a couple of nights a week, just to not be there. It was pathetic. Then came the postcards. They just arrived in the mail. No message, just pictures, old tourist shots of the town, but always with something circled. The farmhouse, mostly, or the road leading up to it. Once, it was a patch of woods behind where the library parking lot now was, and each one was postmarked from a different town, always within a few hours' drive. I thought it was Rand, escalating his harassment. He was trying to scare me off the project. I even went to the police again and showed them the postcards. They took a report, but I could tell they didn't take it seriously. It wasn't a threat, they said. It was just weird. It wasn't until a week later, finding a small, smooth birch twig tucked under the windshield wiper of my car, that I remembered Bet Birch, from high school. The girl I hadn't spoken to in 20 years. The girl whose family owned that farmhouse. I haven't stayed in a hotel since without checking the shower curtain rod. I just give it a firm tug, seeing if it's been loosened. It's a stupid thing to do, I know, but I can't help it. And sometimes when I'm doing it, I remember the smell, not wood smoke exactly, something else, something like wet bark and dust, and I wonder how long it had been there before I smelled it the first time. I still remember the chipped formica on the corner of the counter, right where I'd always rest my elbow. It was a pale yellow but worn through to gray in that one spot, and I'd trace the little divots with my fingertip during slow mornings. I took the job to have a little spending money while I was finishing my degree, working at the student union coffee shop. Mostly it was just tired faces and requests for extra shots, but it was consistent and the hours fit around classes. It felt normal at first. The chipped formica of the counter felt cool under my forearm as I wiped it down. Again, slow night, thankfully. Finals week always brought a weird lull to the student union. Everyone holed up in the library or wherever they actually studied. Obi was supposed to cover for me at 7, and it was 6:30 now. I kept glancing at the door, not because I was eager to leave, but because of that picture. It had been bugging me all day. That old portrait. Everyone else had just accepted it. Like, yeah, there's a sepia-toned photograph of a stern-looking woman in a high-neck dress amongst snapshots of basketball games and club events. Totally normal. But it wasn't normal. It felt deliberately placed, like someone wanted you to notice it. I'd asked Selma if it was new, and she just shrugged and said something about the Alumni Association donating it. Seemed flimsy. Anyway, the address Josie had given me. 412 Hawthorne wasn't far. Maybe a 15-minute walk. I checked it on the map, and it was one of those old Victorian houses, all gables and overgrown ivy. Probably a grad student collective or something. Josie had mentioned it was a study group working on something art history related, I think. Honestly, I hadn't really listened. I just needed the extra cash. Tutoring sounded a lot nicer than another shift slinging lattes. The thing is, as I walked, I kept replaying the conversation. Josie, or whoever she was, had known my name right away. Even remembered I mentioned liking old films during a brief chat weeks ago. It was a weirdly specific recall. Probably just good observation, I figured. People remember things. Still, it felt focused, like I was being remembered. I almost turned back twice. It wasn't fear. Exactly. More like a prickling awareness. Like I was walking towards something that already existed. Something that was waiting. The house smelled like dust and old flowers. Josie had said it was her grandmother's, but it felt staged. Not dirty exactly, just arranged, like no one actually lived there. She led me through a hallway with too many portraits, all stern-faced people I didn't recognize, and into a parlor. That's when I saw him. Jasper. He wasn't tutoring. He was arranging teacups on a small table. He looked up when we entered and gave me a small, tight smile. He hadn't been mentioned, not once. Josie, lovely to have you both. And you must be Ula. Please, sit. I glanced at Josie, who just offered a placating smile. Jasper helps me with some of the organizational aspects of the tutoring, she said, a little too quickly. It felt like a lie, but I didn't push. I figured maybe he was family, a reclusive uncle or something. I sat. The lesson started, but it was off. Josie kept glancing at Jasper, and he seemed to be directing things, not the lesson itself, but the atmosphere. He'd adjust the curtains or subtly shift a vase, always with his eyes on me. After 1 hour, he brought out a plate of cookies. Homemade, he said. I took one, mostly to be polite. It tasted familiar, like something my grandmother used to make, which was impossible. My grandmother lived across the country, and I hadn't seen her in years. Walking back to campus, I took the long way around, past the library and through the engineering quad. I didn't want to risk running into him again. I told myself it was just awkwardness. He was probably just a lonely guy, overbearing but harmless. But I kept checking over my shoulder. I started to wonder if Josie had mentioned I liked those cookies. It was a small thing, but it felt calculated. Like she'd given him information, prepped him. I decided I'd find another tutor. I emailed Josie, polite but firm, saying I'd found another tutor. No reply, which honestly didn't surprise me. She hadn't seemed that invested in the first place. I tried to shake the feeling that I was being watched. It wasn't constant, just little prickles on the back of my neck when I was walking to class or sitting in the library. Then I got the package. It was small, wrapped in brown paper with no return address. Inside was a ceramic bird, painted a really specific shade of blue, the same blue as the teacup Agnes my grandmother used to have, the one that broke when I was 6 and I cried for days. I hadn't thought about that teacup in years. A note was tucked underneath. For a bright student, keep learning, no signature. I almost dismissed it as a weird coincidence. People collect ceramics, right? Maybe someone overheard me mentioning my grandmother once somehow, but then I remembered how meticulously arranged everything had been at Arlen's house. The cookies, the way he'd known about my preference for black coffee, even though I hadn't said a word. It started to feel less like coincidence and more like a performance. I was cataloging the details in my head, trying to figure out who could have sent it. When the power went out, it flickered, then went black, and the front door, which I distinctly remember locking, clicked open. I froze. It wasn't a dramatic, crashing down kind of open, just a soft click, like someone used a key they shouldn't have. I grabbed my phone, fumbling for the flashlight app. The hallway was dark, the bird on the table glowing faintly in the dim light, and then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the kitchen. I didn't think, I just ran. Out the back door into the garden, and didn't stop running until I reached the street. My apartment was 3 blocks away. I looked back. The house was dark and silent, but the front door was still open. I went straight to the police, of course, after everything. They sent a patrol car to my apartment and took a report. It felt so clinical, like a misplaced package, not someone opening my door and just being inside. Detective Kurt was the officer who took the statement. He was polite and asked a lot of questions about Arlen and Josie, about the cookies, the bird. He kept circling back to whether I'd mentioned anything about feeling unsafe to anyone before the break-in, like I should have anticipated it. He ran their names. Arlen and Josie. They had no record, were registered students in good standing. He even checked for restraining orders filed against them or by them. Nothing was found. I kept trying to explain the feeling, the specific knowing, how they seemed to know things, details about my grandmother, about my childhood. He'd nod, make notes, but his expression didn't change. Sometimes, he said, finally, people just pick up things. Social media, mutual friends. You'd be surprised what's out there. It sounded insufficient, but I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. It meant it was just coincidence, a creepy string of coincidences, not something else. I asked if they could increase patrols in the area, maybe set up a camera. He said they were understaffed and resources were stretched thin. He took my number and said they'd follow up if anything turned up. I started digging myself online. I found a local private investigator, Selma. She seemed thorough. I explained everything. The cookies, the gifts, the break-in, the unsettling feeling of being watched. She asked about my online presence, my habits, who I'd spoken to about my life. Then she asked about Agnes, my grandmother. Not just that I had a grandmother, but specifics. Her baking, her garden, the little ceramic bird she kept on the windowsill. I told Selma everything I remembered, and she just listened. She didn't offer explanations, didn't dismiss my fears, but she did say something that stuck with me. She said it felt curated, like someone had been building this intentionally for a long time. I think at the time, I thought it was Arlen. Maybe he had some twisted obsession. Now, I'm not so sure. Selma kept digging, and she found nothing. Not exactly. She found a lot of dead ends. People who vaguely resembled Arlen or Josie in yearbooks from schools I'd never heard of, and profiles on social media that were clearly not them. It was like they'd been constructed from fragments of other people. That's what Selma said. Anyway, constructed. She kept using that word. I started seeing patterns too. Small things. A specific brand of tea bag in the trash, the kind Agnes used to send me. A book left open on the porch swing. A collection of poetry I hadn't touched since college. These weren't valuable things, not things someone would steal, but things that felt placed, like little breadcrumbs. I convinced myself it was Arlen, trying to prove something, some kind of twisted game. He'd been so eager to connect, so insistent on remembering details. Maybe he'd been watching the house, leaving these things to see if I'd notice. Then came the invitations. Not direct ones, not at first. Flyers taped to telephone poles advertised local events, things I'd mentioned liking in passing to, well, I couldn't even remember who. A jazz concert, a pottery class, a bird-watching walk led by someone named Obi. Each one felt tailored, a little too perfect. I stopped going to things. I stopped talking about my interests, even with Selma. It felt like everything was being fed back to me, twisted and offered up like a grotesque gift. I started checking the locks 3 or 4 times before bed. I pulled the curtains closed, even during the day. Now, if someone knocks, I don't open the door. Ever. Not even a crack. I look through the peephole, and if I don't recognize them, I just don't answer. It's automatic. I'm making coffee now, watching the morning light hit the kitchen floor. The mail slot clatters. I don't turn around. I don't need to. I already know. I haven't told anyone about this. Not a single person. It just sat with me, and I kept thinking it needed to be somewhere other than inside my head. It started with a fitness class, a way to get back into shape after a really stagnant year. I fell into a routine with someone I met there, running the trails near campus. And for a while it was just normal. But now, years later, I feel the need to finally lay it all out. The air was crisp that morning. The kind that burns a little in your lungs. Perfect running weather. I fell into a rhythm with Stella, just past the old observatory. We'd been doing this route 3 times a week for nearly 1 month now. She is intense about her training, always pushing for a faster pace, a longer distance. It's good, I guess, keeps me motivated. We passed the service gate near the agricultural fields, the one that leads down towards the river. I distinctly remember Glenn, the groundskeeper, mentioning it at the fitness class 2 weeks ago. He was complaining about someone messing with the lock, leaving it open. He said he'd reinforced it, put a new padlock on it. I remember thinking how grumpy he was about it. Except it was open again. Not hanging open, not visibly forced, just unlocked. I slowed to a walk, and Stella, predictably, kept going, barely noticing, "Everything okay?" She called back, already 20 yards ahead. "Yeah, just that gate." She jogged back, frowning. "What about it?" "Glenn said he fixed the lock. I'm pretty sure it was locked last week." Stella glanced at it, then back at me with that focused look she gets. Maybe he unlocked it to do something and forgot to relock it. It happens. It felt flimsy. That explanation, Glenn is meticulous, but it was the most likely thing. Still, I checked my watch. I'd been tracking our splits, and we were right on schedule. If Glenn had been down there fiddling with the gate, someone would have seen him. It would have thrown off the timing of the irrigation system, which runs on a timer. "Probably," I said, starting to run again. Stella picked up the pace, and I struggled to keep up. I kept glancing back at the gate, though. It just didn't sit right. We kept the pace up for another mile, but I was distracted. Every shadow seemed to shift, and the wind felt wrong. Not cold, just aware. I tried to tell myself it was the gate. Knowing someone had been on the property, even if it was just some bored kid messing around, had gotten under my skin. My phone buzzed in my armband. "Stella, you okay? You're slowing." I typed back, "Just thinking about the gate. Weird." No response. I glanced at her. She was 50 yards ahead, already rounding the bend near the orchard. I tried calling her. No signal. That was odd. We usually had at least 1 or 2 bars out here. I figured it was just a dead zone. They happened. I picked up the pace again, trying to catch up, but when I rounded the bend, she wasn't there. Just empty. And the irrigation line, it wasn't running before. Now one of the big sprayers was rotating, soaking the path. It's a timer thing, probably. Old systems act up, but it forced me off the path, into the rougher ground alongside the orchard. I shouted her name, but the sprayer drowned it out. Then I saw it. A flash of blue, tucked between the trees. Stella's water bottle, the one with the silver cap. I ran toward it, heart hammering. It wasn't just near the trees, it was under one, like someone had deliberately put it there, and the ground around it, usually dry and dusty, was smoothed over, like it had been tamped down. I grabbed the bottle and started back toward the main track, deciding to head straight for the gate. I didn't want to be out here alone, not even for a minute. Maybe she'd gone ahead to check on the gate lock again. That was it. She was probably just being cautious, like me. The gate was unlocked, wide open actually. That didn't make sense. Stella always double-checked it, sometimes even triple-checked. I called her name, but the sound just dissolved in the orchard. All those trees, it was like shouting into cotton. I started walking faster, then almost broke into a run. I kept calling, "Stella, it's not funny." Then I saw it. A flash of color between the rows. Orange. Her jacket. Relief flooded me, but it vanished the moment I got closer. It wasn't her in the jacket. It was draped over a post, like someone had just left it there. And the post wasn't just any post. It was one of those metal irrigation line control things, the kind with a wheel handle. Someone had turned the water on. I hadn't noticed before, but now I could hear it. The low hum of the pumps, the hiss of water spraying, not just a sprinkle either, full force. The path was quickly turning to mud. I had to get out of there. I started angling toward the edge of the orchard, looking for a break in the trees, a way back to the road. That's when I saw the truck. An old pickup, faded green, parked further down the row, almost hidden. A man was leaning against it, watching me. He didn't look like anyone I'd ever seen around here. Older, weathered face. He wasn't doing anything, just observing. Maybe he worked for the orchard. Maybe Stella had asked him to check on something. He started walking towards me, slowly. And I swear he wasn't walking at me, but with the spray. He seemed to be deliberately staying within the arc of the sprinklers, using them as cover. That's when the panic really set in. I turned and just ran. I slipped twice in the mud, nearly fell, but kept going. I burst through the trees onto the road and didn't stop running until I reached my car. I glanced back. The truck was gone, and so was the man. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove straight to Stella's. She is a detective, not a big city one, more a small-town sheriff's department, but she knows things. She knows people. I just needed to tell someone, needed to hear it out loud and have someone say it was crazy, that I'd imagined it. Stella listened, really listened, which is something. She asked a lot of questions about the truck, the man, the orchard, and about Silas. She kept writing things down in a little notebook. When I finished, she didn't say it was crazy. She just said that's specific. What exactly was Silas doing in the orchard? I told her about the running, how he'd started showing up at my house more and more, offering to drive me, bringing me protein bars I didn't ask for. I told her about the gate being open, the clothes. I thought maybe he'd been waiting for me there, planning to, I don't know, scare me. It felt like more than that, even then. Stella made a few calls. She learned the orchard belonged to a Amiss, an old woman, apparently, who lives on the other side of the county. She said Ines had a reputation for being private, and that Silas Crane had a history, a minor one, mostly traffic violations, but a few disturbing the peace complaints. Nothing that explained this. Then Stella said something that made the blood run cold again. Ines rents out parts of her orchard to a hunting club, mostly local men. They use it during season, but they're allowed access year-round. A hunting club, that's what it was. Some sick game. They were watching me, tracking me, making me feel like the prey. It felt contained, like I could understand it, even if it was terrifying. Stella promised to send a deputy out to the orchard to talk to Ines. I felt a little better, stupidly, like maybe this was going to be solved. It didn't get better after Stella sent the deputy. I saw him talk to Ines by the barn. He was a young guy and looked mostly bored. He waved when I ran past, like everything was fine. It wasn't. Silas was still there, not always there, but predictable. He'd be by the northern fence line when I started, or near the pump house on the way back. He was always just on the edge of where I could comfortably ignore him. I started changing my route, trying to lose him in the rows, but he'd adjust. It was unsettling, the way he anticipated me. Like he knew what I was going to do before I did. I told myself it was just coincidence. The orchard isn't that big. He probably just liked running there too. Maybe he was a retired cross-country guy. Then I noticed the truck wasn't always the faded green one. Sometimes it was a dark blue Ford, an older model, always parked a little further out on Orchard Road. Different driver, same feeling. It was like the first truck was a scout. I started taking my phone, keeping it in my hand, thumb hovering over the emergency call button. I felt ridiculous. I stopped running at the orchard after 1 month. It was too much. But then I started noticing them everywhere. Not following, not exactly, just present. The blue Ford at the grocery store, a man who looked a lot like Silas at the library. It wasn't the same as the directness of the orchard, but it was enough to make my skin crawl. It felt like they were mapping me. I still go to the farmer's market every Saturday, but I always check the parking lot first. I scan every pickup truck, every older Ford, and I never go alone. It's just a habit now, a quick assessment, a mental inventory of exits, just in case.